Afshin, looking at immigration and this White House, the former White House special counsel or special advisor, Steve Bannon, he talked about immigration during an interview with the American television news show 60 Minutes. He talked at length about it. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
America was built on her citizens.
We're all immigrants.
America was built on her...
Except the Native Americans who were here.
Don't give me... This is the thing of the left. Right. Charlie, that's beneath you. Right. America's built on our citizens. Look at the 19th century. What built America is called the American system. From Hamilton to Polk to Henry Clay to Lincoln to the Roosevelts. A system of protection of our manufacturing, financial system that lends to manufacturers, okay, and a control of our borders. Economic nationalism is what this country was built on, the American system, right? We go back to that. We look after our own. We look after our citizens. We look after our manufacturing base. And guess what? This country is going to be greater, more united, more powerful than it's ever been.
So we hear that economic nationalism is what this country was built on. What do you make of that?
Well, you know, if you look at, frankly, if you go back to the year 1890, there was a larger proportion of immigrants in the United States than there are today. It's about 17% of the population then. It's about 13% of the population today. The same manufacturing that Steve Bannon talks about, America would not have been the economic power it is without immigrants in those manufacturing facilities. Now, he makes a distinction between citizens, right? So there's always that distinction being made between undocumented. But if you look at the agriculture industry in the United States today, we've got a lot of undocumented migrants today, and that would be, that industry would go in recession if they were all deported in some capacity. So look, clearly everyone agrees that the immigration system in the United States is broken. President Obama agrees, President Clinton, President George W. Bush, and everybody's been trying to figure out how to do it. It seems like President Trump has laid down a marker and said, you guys have 6 months to fix this. I'm not sure that's going to happen in the next 6 months.
Morgan, what do you think? What do you make of Bannon's comments?
Well, first, I do believe an important distinction must be made, and too often the left does do this. It conflates illegal and legal immigrants. There's a huge, massive gap between any country's approach to managing its own civilian and citizenry versus how it manages an illegal immigration problem. Any country in the world would want to have an effective way in which they can manage the flow of people in and out of their country. That is sort of common sense. I do believe words matter, and sometimes when folks like Mr. Bannon use nationalism, it can sort of trigger a little bit a much more emotional and visceral reaction to a complex issue. And that may not necessarily be helpful. But I do think that both parties have failed time and time again to be able to put together a comprehensive plan to manage our immigration. And we have seen the numbers of illegal immigrants quadruple, quintuple, grow exponentially. And I think no one that I know in the Republican Party is against immigration, but everyone I know is against illegal immigration. I mean, but sometimes that's pushed off aside, but we think that's a very important distinction to make.
You want to say something?
Well, I mean, I take the point that, you know, any country would want to have control of its borders. You want legal immigration. However, when we acknowledge that our system is broken, when we acknowledge that what we have isn't working, that's what causes these people to come to this country the way they are, in this sort of irregular, illegal, undocumented ways. If we had a sane system that would work for people who desperately need to get away from countries like Honduras, which are just like ravaged with gang violence, you know, they would probably, they're not crazy. They'd happily stand in line, get a piece of paper, and do what needs to be done. But we just don't have that system available to them. So these decisions are made out of desperation, and laws mean nothing if they don't evolve with society and with what people need. So.
Right. And Morgan, I'm wondering to what extent this has been overtaken by politics into the country, to what extent the president is talking to that base, anti-immigrant base it may be. If you look at something like DACA, or DACA as it's known, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, these are young people, kids, children who arrived here in the country. President Obama gave them a chance, a pathway to stay in the country, to become citizens here. Now President Trump says, well, that's got to go. I mean, doesn't that sound cruel to you to suddenly tell children that they're not wanted here, they have to leave?
Well, you threw out a lot of things there. First, you began by saying immigration, again, versus illegal immigration.
Yeah.
That is an important distinction that Republicans who are watching this would be very angry that I wouldn't address that issue. Secondly, when President Obama did the DACA process, it was temporary and totally unconstitutional. And I am absolutely for a comprehensive, not comprehensive, but an elegant solution to the DACA problem. But because President Obama did a temporary fix, then it failed to address it for 8 years in office, including the first 2 years, where it was both houses of Congress were controlled by Democrats and had a Democratic president. It put this new Republican president, President Trump, in a very awkward position. So Trump, I strongly believe President Trump, at the end of 6 months, if there's not a fix, I strongly believe, and you can mark my words on this, that he will not begin any type of deportation process for the DACA folks. I strongly believe he will be working behind the scenes with congressional leaders on both parties, Democrats happily, if he needs to get that done. I might be wrong. We'll see. But I strongly believe that.
What do you think, Afshin? 6 months.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think President Trump is going to want those images of tearful goodbyes and people being rounded up and massively deported. But I don't think he necessarily understands that, you know, to get a comprehensive immigration reform plan the way he wants, he's going to have to make some compromises, and I'm not sure he's ready to make those compromises that he's going to need to make.
Dorothy, you want to say?
Well, I mean, obviously, nobody thought DACA was perfect. It was actually a Band-Aid. It was a temporary solution. But you can't just throw out a temporary solution, just trash it, and then say, well, it's going to go away in 6 months, and we're just going to hope that Congress is going to come up with something. Because that leaves, you know, somewhere between 690,000 to 800,000 people in limbo. And these people, let's not forget, they've actually done nothing wrong. They were brought here as minors, right? They're going to school. Some of them have served in the military. They're working, and they have to reapply, re-up every 2 years. Their backgrounds are checked. You know, this isn't something that gives amnesty to criminals or whatever it is you sometimes hear Republicans talk about. This is a program that's meant to give these people a chance, right? So, you know, I think that President Trump sort of promised more than he could deliver in that case, because I think Afshin's right. He doesn't want that. You know, he said he was going to rescind it, and then he realized what that would actually look like. And so now he's punted it over to Congress to sort out in 6 months.
Okay, let's get on to our last topic today, and that is President Trump's unique, novel way of communicating with the country, the world, his supporters, and that is using Twitter. Qinduo, let me bring you in on this. You know, the president regularly uses Twitter to give us his thoughts on myriad issues. He recently used Twitter to urge China to do more on the DPRK nuclear issue. The Chinese officials who are sitting in the foreign ministry or in the presidential office in Beijing, what do they make of a president who communicates via Twitter?
Well, I think, you know, they don't have a problem with the U.S. president using social media, either Twitter or Facebook. Remember, former U.S. President Barack Obama also used Facebook and Twitter. But I think, you know, people, not only the government, but also the people in general, do have this sense of frustration or confusion caused by frequent and sometimes random tweets, you know, posts by President Trump. You know, some of the tweets are basically contradicting their official policy, either, you know, mapped out by the White House or announced by, say, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson on North Korea. So it's a bit confusing, but hopefully things will be fine. But the people still say, you know, politics is a serious business, and you know, if you speak too frequently, if you comment on topics too randomly, and it reduces the seriousness, and somehow probably it's backfiring.
Well, you made the point there, politics is serious, and how could you really communicate a policy or, you know, your statement on something important in 140 characters? Morgan, there's been a lot of criticism of President Trump's use of Twitter, and again, Steve Bannon talked about that during that interview on 60 Minutes. Let's take a listen to what Mr. Bannon had to say.
He knows he's speaking directly to the people who put him in office when he uses Twitter. And sometimes it's not in the custom and tradition of what the opposition party deems is appropriate, you're absolutely correct. It's not. And he's not going to stop. And by the way, General Kelly, who I have the most tremendous respect for and has put in very tight processes, he's not going to be able to control it either, because it's Donald Trump. It's Donald Trump talking directly to the American people. And say something else, you're going to get some good there, and every now and again, you're going to get some less good, okay? But you're just going to have to live with it.
So, Morgan, what do you make of that? Are we going to have to live with this? Is this how the president is going to conduct the affairs of the White House?
Yes. I mean, unfortunately, I do think it is. As a Republican strategist myself, I'm not a huge fan of it, but I understand the point, is that President Trump went against all of the norms, all of the traditional methodology to become president of the United States, and it worked. For better or for worse, depending on your point of view, his unorthodox strategy produced an enormous, massive political upset. He did it against the advice of all the inside the Beltway mainstream Republicans, possibly myself included in that, that would have said that's not the way you run a campaign or run the presidency. I truly believe President Trump just doesn't care about things like tradition, norms. He sees himself as a new era politician, and he strongly believes that what he's doing is effective for him. And I think it's true. For better or for worse, there's going to be some silliness in there from time to time, like some of the tweets around banning trade with certain countries and these things because of North Korea. But I just think he doesn't care. I just think he is who he is.
What do you think, Dorothy? I mean, are people going to take a president seriously when he uses Twitter?
Well, they took him seriously enough to vote him in, I guess. But the point is that, okay, so what he's doing plays well in the American public. I mean,
Right.
Mr. Bannon might have a point. However, the president doesn't just speak directly to the American people. He's speaking to the whole world. He has to care about gravitas when he's dealing with Russia, when he's dealing with China, when he's dealing with North Korea, when he's dealing with Iran, when he's dealing with Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, Qatar. He might have to compel himself to care about how he comes across and not just shoot from the hip with a lot of exclamation marks at any given hour.
But does it perhaps explain his use of Twitter when he also says that the media is fake media, conventional media, mainstream media? So he's getting around them by using Twitter.
I mean, I don't know what he thinks he has to get around, because we're still going to report what he says on Twitter. There's no getting around anything.
Right.
All he's getting around is his advisors, probably, in the White House.
Afshin.
Yeah, well, I think, look, President Trump does feel that the mainstream media has been unfair to him. He does feel that Twitter allows him to speak directly to the American people. Look, I have no problem with a president using Twitter. I have a problem with how this president uses Twitter. I don't think we're ever going to have a president in the future who doesn't use Twitter. I think this is just the way of the future. But I think this president, as with many things, shows a lack of discipline. And when you show lack of discipline on Twitter, it's very dangerous.
Right. And Morgan, to that point, you get a situation in the White House where the president sends out a tweet which undermines what his key aides have said perhaps just the day before, or even hours before.
Yes, I think in this administration, it would be very, very challenging to be a senior aide or someone who needs to explain policy positions of this president. You have to be very nimble and to be very intellectually agile. I admit it, it's a very big challenge. I would think it would be a tough job, and I don't think they get paid enough to do it. It's a challenge.
Dorothy, you're a journalist. What do you make of the fact that the president's constantly attacking the media, constantly referring to them as this fake media?
Well, I think if the media fawned on him more, he wouldn't say that. He just doesn't like criticism. And that's a tough job. That's probably the wrong job for him to take if he doesn't like criticism.
Is the media being unfair towards him?
I mean, occasionally I'll read something that seems kind of pointless or catty, but when we, I suppose, critically look at his policies, his bombast, his contradictory statements, his campaign promises versus what he's delivered. I mean, this is standard issue reporting. This is nothing new targeting President Trump. He doesn't like it.
But I think, Anand, what is happening is in many ways, he throws out a tweet and he says, "Look at this shiny object," and then the media chases after that tweet, and then the media actually doesn't do some of the reporting that they ought to be doing on some of the tough policy issues.
I like the reference to shiny object. But we're going to have,
if I may,
very quickly, Morgan. I've got like 10 seconds.
Sure, if I may. Donald Trump, President Trump has been brilliant using the media as a foil, and the media is very predictable as they fall into line. Exactly what he wants.
Yeah. We're also attracted by shiny objects. We're gonna have to leave it there. Thanks to all of you for being with us.